Hello, Internet people. We are excited to record today another episode of the Concealed Carry Podcast. We'll be recording episode 495. Should be lots of fun.
Without Riley. Not that it's
Yes.
fun without Riley, but
We're sans Riley. Sometimes it is more fun without Riley, actually. Not always. I mean, not as a rule, but
right.
you know, sometimes he's a downer. I don't know what to say. So today's our monthly DGU episode. So we have a handful of news stories that Matthew has curated from the plethora that exist on the internet from the last month or so. And DGU meaning defensive gun use. So we're going to be looking at and attempting to extract some lessons that we can learn from these stories. I think we have a total of 6 of them. So it's going to be super fun. Welcome, Mark. Handsome dudes. Okay, I'll take that. I'll loan that. Absolutely. Hello, Tony. John, thanks for being here. So it should be a good time. And we're going to, do that. Record this episode and talk about shootings and what we can learn from them. Yep.
Yeah, I'm down to do that.
Yep. Okay, good. So here we go. In 3, 2, 1. This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, episode 495. Welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast. I am your host, Jacob Paulson. I'm joined today by Matthew Marister.
Greetings, sir.
Yes, greetings. Today we're going to be recording episode 495 titled Victim Charged with Homicide. A reminder, the Concealed Carry Podcast is part of the concealedcarry.com network and sponsored by XS Sites. Today is Wednesday, April 7th when we're recording this, and we have today a collection of defensive gun use stories we're going to be reviewing. These are stories that we've curated. Well, Matthew curates them. And we go through them and try and extract some good lessons. We do this once a month, and so this is the monthly DGU episode. We, I suppose, should excuse Riley Bowman, your usual host. He is not available today. He is traveling and will be competing this week at the USPSA Area 6 competition in North Carolina. So you get me and Matthew for today.
Good luck, Riley.
Good luck. Yes. Good luck,
Sure,
Riley.
he's listening.
Yeah. I hope he's satisfied with his performance and does awesome because he's got his logo, our logo on the shirt. And so I'd like it to, not suck. It's going to be great. Now, first, a couple words from our sponsors. Today's episode is sponsored by CCW Safe, the liability coverage, dealio, insurance, whatever you want to call it, thing that we prefer here at concealedcarry.com. In fact, the more research we do, the more we learn, the more we get intimately familiar with all of the competitors, the more I feel that CCW Safe is the best product out there. You can learn more at ccwsafe.com and be sure to use coupon code CCPodcast, all one word, to save 10% when you sign up. And if you want to learn more about all of the competitors and stuff in that industry, you can always go to concealedcarry.com/insurance, where we kind of have our big comparison chart. We're going to be updating that chart here soon. There's some things that we've been getting asked about recently from consumers that they want to know about these companies that aren't on that chart. So we're going to be updating that soon, and I think it's going to be very valuable. Today's episode is also brought to you by the Guardian Conference. This is a shameless plug. Guardian Conference, an event that we are putting on in September to be the first annual one. Hopefully we'll do this every year. And it's shaping up to be pretty fantastic. It's a 3-day training event. So, many of you probably listening to this have taken a 3-day class from an instructor before. This is a similar concept, except that instead of training with one instructor over the course of those 3 days, you're probably going to train with about 6. The 3 days, the weekend of training is going to be broken into 4-hour blocks, 2 blocks per day. And I would strongly encourage you to learn more at guardianconference.com. And just a quick note that the Guardian Conference is now also being sponsored by XS Sites. So we appreciate their support of that event as well. Okay. So a quick disclaimer, and I think we generally say something like this, but in case it's been a while since you've heard us say this, I was just reviewing the news stories that we're going to cover today, Matthew, and I just want to remind listeners that it is not our intention to pass judgment on the people involved in these stories. And we are aware, we know that we are, what's it called? Armchair quarterbacking, right? That we, from the safety of our our little home offices, where we're not stressed, we're not in the situation, we're not there. We get to look back on the events and say, "Oh, you should have done this, you should have done that," and we get it. Like, we know that that's maybe not super kind or necessarily I won't say appropriate, because I don't think anything inappropriate about it, but we understand that context is what it is. But we do it because we think that there's valuable insights to learn. We think that, none of us are perfect on any day, and least so when we're in these kinds of situations. So, we have to allow that people make mistakes, and that we could make mistakes too. But we also want to learn from other people's mistakes when they're made, and that's nothing against them. It's just an opportunity for us to gain. And so I wanted to kind of make that disclaimer that we get it, but we can still learn. So we should go through these things and identify those lessons we can pull out of them.
Yeah, and to your point, I mean, it's super important that you brought that up, and I think we sometimes mention this, but like you said, we maybe we haven't prefaced a whole episode in a while, but like that, when I'm going through these stories, I'm trying to pull stuff that we can learn from. Like, I go through hundreds of DGUs, and some of them are small, short on or really thin on details, which it's hard to really learn anything. So when we pull these stories, which are good and bad, right? It's the point is what are some things that we can pull out that we can learn from. So in general, everybody's use of force is going to be different, but in general, these are some commonalities we see and things that people can do better, or something that you can think about. And it's never to pile on to somebody's bad day, right? But somebody's going to read the story, and so we might as well try to read it in a way that we can get some information out of it in a good way, and pass it on to you guys. So hopefully that's what we're conveying. But
yep,
I thank you
absolutely
for bringing that up.
Yeah, because we're going to have some today where without that disclaimer, I might come off as quite judgmental. And so I just want to be cautious and make sure we're clear on that.
Sure.
All right, so let's start in Virginia at Clay's Mill. Interesting name of a town. Probably once there was a mill there built by a guy named Clay, and someone decided to make a town out of it. So Clay's Mill, Virginia. So here's what I understand about this one. This is from yourgv.com, whatever the crap that website is. Your Gazette Virginia. Sorry, I didn't mean to downplay the Gazette Virginian. So this is from the Gazette Virginian, and the news story title: Clay's Mill father shot, killed after 12-year-old son mistakes him for intruder. So that gives up the juice of where we're going with this. So roughly what we have here is we have a 12-year-old boy who's at home. And at some point earlier in the day, he says that something spooked him, right? 12-year-old home alone. I don't think it's that hard to get spooked. I have a 13-year-old son, and he's pretty easily spooked when he's home alone. So, you hear a weird noise or something, right? And it says that this something that spooked him caused him to retrieve a .22 caliber rifle. So the first thing we know about this incident, Matthew, is that there's a .22 caliber rifle that's readily available to a 12-year-old to grab in this home.
Sure.
You can, we can pass judgment on that or not, but we know that to be true. So something spooks the kid. He grabs his .22 caliber rifle. Now, later in the day, his parents come home at a different time than when they usually do. So maybe, I don't know, maybe normally they come home at 6, and this time they come home at 5 or something. But when the son when he hears something at the door, he shoots down the hallway, according to Sheriff Clark. Now, it wasn't until his mother yelled that the 12-year-old boy, realizes that it was his parents coming in the door, not some shady intruders. So the shot he fired hit his father. His father is suffering from the gunshot wound right there in the hallway at the entrance to the home. So the deputies show up and they provide some first aid to the victim, but unfortunately he dies from what I presume to be a single .22 caliber gunshot wound. It doesn't say that multiple shots were fired. So from what we know, a single .22 caliber gunshot wound. Now, this one's a pretty tragic one, Matthew. And I don't know about you, Matthew. I have a handful of folders I keep of news stories that fit certain narratives. and this happens to be one I keep. I maintain a list of news stories where homeowners accidentally shoot their family members. Call me a bad person, I do it. So I when I saw this one in our outline today, I went and added it to my list of incidents like this. And I'm going to be including in the show notes today a link to episode number 362. If you're listening to this and you haven't listened to episode 362, the title of that episode is How to Not Mistake Your Loved Ones as Intruders. I would encourage you to go listen to that, because I think what happens, and this is what happened in this case to this poor 12-year-old boy, is poor tactics lead us into a situation or environment where we don't have the time or opportunity to identify the target before we feel it's necessary to shoot at it. Now, sometimes it's just straight up like a bad decision, but a lot of times it's not a bad decision in the heat of the moment. It's the problem is that the moment was created because of bad tactics beforehand. So this is pretty tragic. This 12-year-old's going to have to grow up knowing he killed his dad. That's pretty sucky. And Matthew, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so you touched on initially, he's a 12-year-old boy. Now everybody's different. Every child has different responsibility and maturity, right, at 12 years old. So some 12-year-olds probably should have access to a 22 caliber rifle. Some of them may not or should not, right? So that's you mentioned we're not judging on that, but it is a fact that this firearm was unsecured. Now, when we think about unsecured firearms in the home, we're like, okay, small children or people or kids that, don't know any better and might accidentally shoot themselves. Well, apparently, this 12-year-old, I don't want to say apparently, I'm speculating that he had some sort of either training or knowledge of the firearm in order to use it defensively, right? Because probably wouldn't go to getting the gun and carrying it around the house had he not, had authorization like that, probably. But like I said, I'm speculating. But so he, it's not just I accidentally, negligently discharge the gun because I'm a small child, but it could be I make a bad decision and shoot somebody that I shouldn't. And unfortunately, this is what happened. And I just think it's you've covered it and we've covered it so many times. Like, you have to identify the target. And I think what's happening is, a child at this age probably gets the lecture of, hey, this is how you handle the gun safely. But without the context of identifying your target and what's beyond it off of the range, that probably wasn't as ingrained as keep your finger off the trigger and all those types of things. And I think it's just a huge thing. We can't shoot at things that we don't see, or I'm just imagining, like, again, I'm speculating, but this kid, sticking the gun around like the corner of the hallway and just shooting down the hallway, not really looking or seeing, but hearing something and just shooting down there and happening to, unfortunately, his father. But tragic story, but this goes to say, we just have to, training is super important. It's not just safety training. It's understanding how to use the firearm, especially if you're going to have it as a defensive tool in the home. I think it's a huge difference between how are you safely unloading it and cleaning it and those types of things. So,
yeah, those are good comments. To me, there's kind of two sides of this coin. There's the, don't mistakenly shoot your family members side of the discussion, which we hashed out pretty well in episode, whatever I said it was, 392, I think. And I think that there's some critical tactics issues there. There's this, there's a door, somebody's coming through that door. I take up a position right on the other side of the door. Well, when that door opens, if it's a bad person, if it's a BG, I pretty much got to start shooting, and that doesn't afford me an opportunity to identify the threat. So there's tactics involved in putting some piece of cover between me and the door, right? So I can take up better cover, so I can buy myself time. Just lighting, hey, I think I hear a noise. Let's get these lights on, so when that door opens, I can see who the crap it is. I infer, like you, Matthew, that this kid knows how to use a 22 rifle, and that he aimed, shot, hit what he aimed at, and he just didn't know what he was aiming at. That's the problem. So a variety of tactics related things, verbal commands. I mean, we could go on, and I think we've covered that in the past. But the other side of this coin, and Matthew, this is the one that I think you're kind of flirting with, that I don't have a good answer for. And that is this issue of children and guns, because we've covered plenty of DGUs on this show where a 12-year-old, 13-year-old, 11-year-old, 16-year-old, whatever, has effectively used a gun to defend their family from a legitimate threat. And so we've covered those stories, and I'm a dad. I leave my children alone. My oldest kid is big enough to watch the younger child's, right? So like I don't have an issue with that. I think that's pretty common practice, right? Even if you hire a babysitter, at some point adults leave children, youth, non-adults alone in a house, right? And so there's some degree of like difficult balance to be determined how you're going to manage that situation. Because if you feel like, well, they're alone more than ever before, they definitely need access to a firearm to defend themselves. Okay, like that's a decision I think is justifiable and allowable, but it's a loaded one. Like it has to come with a ton of other stuff, not just, well, they're not going to play with it and they know the safety rules and they're responsible enough to follow them. But in this case, it also came with a variety of other tactics related decisions and mindset related things that caused the tragic accident because they weren't deployed properly. And pretty hard to judge a 12-year-old for doing that poorly. But if the 12-year-old was given permission to access a gun to defend the home, that had to come with some other things. And maybe it did. Maybe he had he just made bad decisions. That certainly happens too. But something to consider for the parents out there for sure.
Yeah, I just to your point, and I think you pretty much encapsulated in a lot of the comments were like, there's a difference between being physically capable of being safe with a gun and being able to make split-second life or death prudent decisions that you can't undo, right? And so those two things have to be. I mean, you could take a kid hunting, teach them safety, and show them how to shoot, but it's different than them being on their own and having to make the decision: do I shoot at this sound or shape or what object coming through the door? And if I do, how many times? And all that. It's a huge, like, I don't want to say maturity thing, because it's not necessarily maturity. It's just an ability to, I guess, formulate these think on your feet as far as tactically mindset. So, and the sad thing is the last comment, and I did some research on this article. As far as there's no update past this, but the incident is under investigation and charges are pending. So they are considering charges. It doesn't say on who, right? Like, are the parents being charged with leaving the gun unsecured, or are they charging the juvenile with some sort of negligence? I don't know. But this adds a layer of complexity to an already horrific, event that happened in this family. So, yeah,
we've seen incidents before where parents kill their kids. So I suppose better that the kid killed the parent. But no matter what happens, when a family member is killed by another family member, that's a rough life ahead of you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully there's some life insurance that can pay for therapy. I don't know. All right, let's move on to the next one. Matthew, break this one down for us. Man killed after breaking into car. Suspect charged with murder.
Yeah, so not a good one. This is in our what not to do section of the podcast here. Jackson, Mississippi. So basically what happens here is Jackson police were called to the scene Tuesday. Homicide. They classified it as a homicide. Somebody dies, right? According to police, a body of a man was found behind a street, behind a home on the street, after the homeowner heard several gunshots. So the witnesses, happens around 8 a.m. A man is seen breaking into a vehicle. Witnesses see what is later identified as the owner of the vehicle that was being broke into by this guy, confronts this guy who's breaking into his vehicle. The car burglar runs off, and as you suspect, the car owner chases after him, basically ends up shooting him and killing him. So there's not a ton of information other than he chases him down, shoots him, and kills him. This is one of those things we don't really need to beat a dead horse, but it comes up quite often where people go beyond a defensive use of a firearm, and it starts out as, hey, I'm just going out to confront this person because it's my property, or I want to investigate and stop this guy. But oftentimes it escalates beyond that. And I suppose, and this is just me thinking out loud, and I'm not saying specifically to this case, but I feel that a lot of these instances start well before the person goes out and chases them down and shoots them. It starts like with this mindset that like, I'm not letting anybody steal my car, break into my car. They're not leaving my house except in a body bag. And that type of mentality, or very like, not understanding that it's property, and not knowing where to draw the line, that switch that is normally off, and then we flip it on when we have to become violent and do things that aren't necessarily pretty. That switch is kind of always like halfway on or ready to go, and more so on the I'm not going to let this guy get away with it. And I think it tends to force us to do things that not force us, but lead us down a road that we end up doing things that we probably in retrospect wouldn't have done. And I'm sure that this guy's sitting in jail now because he is in custody charged with murder, saying, man, I mean, what was in my car, even my car itself, that was worth me sitting here charged with murder and potentially losing my freedom? So I don't know. I'm sure you have something smart you can add, Jacob.
Well, I think we got to think through this in terms of a variety of aspects. There's a legal aspect, there's a moral and ethical aspect, there's a tactical aspect, and there's also a mindset issue. And I think you addressed the mindset issue. Mm-hmm. And I'll add that there's also an emotional issue. So I'm gonna kind of very quickly go through these, because the mindset is definitely the key here. The key that makes this come to pass is a poor mindset, not a defensive mindset, but a mindset that more important than your personal outcome is the outcome of the criminal. When you think that their outcome, that they go to jail, that they not do this to somebody else again, that they do not get away with breaking into a car, when you think that outcome is more important than your own safety, that's a bad mindset. And that sounds crazy when I say it that way, but how else do you want me to interpret when you decide to chase down somebody who just broke into your car? A complete stranger who you don't know their physical ability, you don't know what weapons they have on them. It just, the only interpretation I can make is that in your brain, you've determined that their outcome is more important than your outcome. That's a bad mindset. There's an emotional factor here as well. And I think we see this a lot. And this is the one that I think we fail to grasp the gravity of, because when we're sitting here talking about it in hindsight, it's easy to be like, well, that's crazy. Why would you chase that person down? But in the moment, I think we have to understand that that's the natural thing to do. It is natural. There's like the emotion in your inside of you is like, hey, someone's breaking into my car. What the crap? Like, I have to stop them. And then you get out there and you're like, hey, get away from my car. And they start running. And what's the emotion? Like, it's not like in that moment, you're not logically thinking. Because logically you'd be like, yeah, I should let them go. That's, maybe I could follow from a distance, observe and report if I think I could do that safely, but I should probably let them go. But that's not what happens. Like, there's no logic in that moment. Your brain is shut off. You are completely running on like supernatural core emotional reaction, which is like, not cool. I'm going to get you. Like, I'm going to stop you. I'm not going to let this happen again. And that's natural. And so overcoming the emotion is only done when you've really trained the mindset, when you've driven that home so deep that you are able to do that. Let's talk tactics for a second. And this is, I think we kind of covered this with mindset, but it is not tactically smart to chase someone down because they criminalized you. Like, there's nothing about that is going to help you win the fight, right? Like, if you're trying to increase your odds of survival, that that's the wrong decision. Like it is tactically fool. You are decreasing your own odds of surviving by chasing this person down. So the tactical side of this is also stop, don't run. And then we have the moral ethical issue. The moral ethical issue on this may be a little bit more blurry, because you might be thinking, well, I have a moral obligation to mankind to stop criminals from escaping justice. Perhaps, but your role in society is not that. Your role is not to chase people down and prevent them from escaping. Your role is to protect you and your loved ones, and where possible, as you deem necessary, strangers. But your role is not to make sure that car thieves who run when someone confronts them, that they end up in a prison cell. That's just not your role, unless you're a cop. If you're listening to this and you're a cop, like, that's your role. Like, we expect you to chase them, okay? So anyway, this stuff freaks me out, because I wonder if my mindset is strong enough to prevent me from turning into an animal and acting on emotional instinct instead of what I know I should do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think all that starts, like you're saying, like, it all starts before the event happens, right? Like, we don't, if we don't train ourselves to be able to control our emotions, those emotions that override our rational thinking and logical processing, if we don't control that or give ourselves the ability to control that, then we're constantly going to be fighting with people, road rage incidents and things like that. And I think one of the things that I appreciate about this podcast is the opportunity to kind of, and sometimes we get comments about, oh, everybody's, they just want them to, we're too easy on, criminals, and we want people to, we facilitate people getting away and things like that. But it's the opposite. We're trying to preserve people's lives that from making bad decisions beforehand, if we can, and try to get some rational thought into what they're doing, rather than just reacting emotionally. So we have that ability to. So I if you guys are listening, you hear this all the time, but I think it never can be, said too often. So
the next story is going to help further illustrate our point, but I'll give just one last thought. There's not a place in America, in the United States of America, where this person's actions would be deemed legal.
No.
There's just not. So, like, the last component of this, the legal aspect, there's nothing legally justified about chasing down somebody who attempted to break into your car and shooting them. Nothing. The initial confrontation is past. That threat is over. Now there's a new confrontation in which you are the aggressor and you have no active threat. Someone running away from you is not an active threat. So, nothing about this is even remotely close to legal self-defense. And remember, as Andrew Branca likes to say, it's a binary issue, because you're admitting to shooting somebody. You're just claiming I did it in self-defense. Well, the second you lose self-defense, all you have left is your admission of shooting someone. And in this case, that's called homicide, and that dude's going to be in big trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Whew, not good. All right, so we got one more what not to do here. We're going to Lookeba. I don't know, Lookeba, Oklahoma. Lookeba, I don't know. What do you say, Matthew?
Yeah, Lookeba. I'm good with that.
How about Lookeba? That sounds cooler. All right, Lookeba. Ooh, that's good. Lookeba, Oklahoma, in Caddo County, Caddo. Woo. The story here titled "Caddo County Homeowner Involved in Shootout with Home Invasion Suspects." This one is freaking crazy. So I think it's my turn. So I'll give it to you here. I'm gonna try. So what we have a homeowner. Our homeowner gets home, on March 22nd, and notices two suspicious men circling his home. So what do you think the first thing this guy does? First thing he does, he calls his brother-in-law, who lives down the road. Now, in case you're wondering, this is a pretty rural area. These guys are probably farmers, okay? So he calls his brother-in-law down the road, who's probably closer than law enforcement, and he says, "Hey, dude, like, you better get down here, because I'm fixing to get burglarized." Okay? That's according to Caddo County Sheriff Spencer Davis. He says that's what he does. He calls his brother-in-law and tells him to get down here because he's fixing to get burglarized. So one of the two suspects, ages 22 and 30, they start to kick in the homeowner's back door. We have no idea what the suspects' motives are. Are they hoping this house is empty, looking for a quick, laptop or, score of some electronics? Or are they like, let's go kill us somebody? Like, we don't know, right? Like, we know they're armed. That's going to come up here in a minute. But they start kicking in the back door. So when they start to kick down the door and they start to enter the house, the homeowner fired a shot in that direction. Didn't hit anybody, according to the sheriff. Then one of the suspects fires a shot back at the homeowner. So now we have shots going both ways. We got the homeowner shooting at suspects and suspects shooting back. Now, the suspects decide that this is a bad course of action and they probably should not do this. So they retreat. They get into some sort of vehicle because it says they drive away. So they got into a vehicle, presumably theirs, that they brought with them, and they start to drive away. But as they're driving away, the homeowner's family member, presumably the brother-in-law that was called, he is showing up in his car. So what does he do? He starts to follow them. He says, "Hey, that must be the bad guy's car. They're driving. I got this. Like, I'm on it, right? I got him in my sights." So the brother-in-law is now following our suspects down the road. The suspects begin firing shots back at the brother-in-law, supposedly, right? The family member, whoever that is, I presume it's the brother-in-law, through the sunroof. Okay. So this is not like, like turn out the back window shooting a guy, like someone's like in the sunroof shooting at the brother-in-law as this, the car chase is going down this rural country road. It doesn't say if the brother-in-law also returned fire or shot at the suspects. It just says that the suspect shot through the sunroof at the brother-in-law. As this gun battle car chase scene unfolds Hollywood style, our criminals, the suspects, they crash into a nearby tree and run away on foot. At some point in here, dispatch finally gets a phone call and the sheriff's office shows up. It says that law enforcement show up shortly after the crash. One of the two suspects immediately gives himself up to law enforcement. Yes, I'm one of the dudes. I crashed into the tree. You can have me. The other one has run off, and a several hour-long manhunt happens. Right, it begins, and eventually the second suspect is found, and he surrenders himself in a nearby field. And I'll wrap it up with this quote from the sheriff. He says the following quote: "I would not advise breaking into anything in rural Oklahoma because they don't mess around." End quote. Says Sheriff Davis, and then quote, "Somebody might end up getting hurt." End quote. We know that both suspects had meth on them and they were convicted felons. So, yeah, what do you think about that one, Matthew?
Yeah, well, Elkie, as you're describing this, and as I was reading the story earlier, I was on the same. Elkie made a comment that reminds me of a Dukes of Hazzard episode. That was exactly what I was thinking. I'm imagining this Dukes of Hazzard, like General Lee jumping and all kinds of stuff over rivers and stuff. But here's the thing: this is obviously a justified save, right? Like the actual use of force inside the home. Somebody's breaking in your home is a justified use of force, and it obviously seemed to be one of the main factors that caused these two guys not to continue to break into the home. But I put it under the what not to do because in general, right? Like we probably don't want to pursue after people like this. Like the brother-in-law, might not have known that they were armed at the time when he's pulled up. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't, but he certainly found out once they started shooting at him, and thank God he wasn't hit, but he obviously could have been, right? So imagine the tragic thing that would, how tragic this would be for the brother who calls his brother-in-law, who ends up getting killed chasing after two, burglars, right? So, I mean, this had a happy ending. And like you said, they probably called his brother. I don't know if he called him first or called the police after. I'm not sure. But hopefully, and it doesn't say in the story, the sequence, but hopefully the police were called before the brother, even if, they're far away, even more so reason to call the police before the brother if the police response is going to be delayed. So, or sheriff or whatever. But we all live in different areas, right? So these people might have had a 30-minute response time. So he's like, hey, get down here. I don't want to be by myself. Totally appropriate. Use of force is appropriate. Just the reason why I kind of put it into a what not to do category is, the Dukes of Hazzard, chase afterwards exposes you and opens you up to not only just being injured, but imagine, and I don't know the roads and stuff like that, but imagine if, one of these two people crosses over a median and strikes a family as they're in this, police chase or this chase, right? It happens all the time. And a family gets killed because these people are chasing after them, right? So there's a whole bunch of things, bad things that can happen when you chase after somebody, especially when they're shooting at you or just randomly shooting in general area. So good outcome, probably not the best decisions, but we're able to kind of look at it in retrospect and say, and I don't know about you, Jacob, but I always, when I think about stories like this, I always wish I could reach out to the people and talk to them and say, hey, do you second guess doing this or that? Would you have done it differently? Now looking back or would you have done the same thing? And I think it'd be an interesting question to ask.
Yeah. Like our last story, the dude is sitting in a jail cell. I bet he has some regrets.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will give some props to the homeowner. Not only does presumably he's probably the one who called the police. He also called his brother-in-law, but he also had the awareness to notice some dudes were walking around his house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because it could have been a much worse situation for him if he was just sitting there watching TV and completely unaware. And, in about 4 seconds, someone starts kicking in his back door and then comes through it with a gun. That would be a pretty crappy day. But instead, he's like, I see these dudes. I'm making phone calls. I'm getting my gun. I'm ready. They're at the back door now in a position over here. Oh, they're kicking in that door. I'm ready. I'm primed. They come through the door. I'm taking action. So all that seemed pretty on point. And I thought that was pretty cool. So anyway, the only other takeaway I have from this is that for those of you who listen to this who think that, you live somewhere this wouldn't happen to you, I bet people in Caddo County, Oklahoma, don't expect random criminals who are convicted felons have warrants out for them for drug possession and shooting with the intent to kill to randomly show up on some random country road and try and burglarize a house. So if that can happen there, I don't think any of us are exempt from this happening to us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next, we are going to Fox 29 in Philadelphia. Headline, victim in attempted carjacking shoots 14-year-old suspect. Matthew, lay this one out.
Yeah, any headline like this coming out of Philadelphia isn't good, right? Philadelphia, another Lyft driver, I think in our last DGU episode, we covered another shooting where a Lyft driver had to use a firearm, and she ended up getting fired from her job at Lyft because they have a no gun policy. It doesn't mention that in this article, but here's what happened. So a Lyft driver, and this happened at 5 a.m. Lyft driver gets called or paged or whatever you call it, chartered, and goes to pick up two people. They're both juveniles. I think a 14 and a 15-year-old. Call this Lyft driver. And so when the Lyft driver shows up, they attempt to carjack the Lyft driver. And the Lyft driver actually has a firearm, even though it's contrary to Lyft's policy. He has a real firearm, draws it out. He also, by the way, has a concealed carry license, so it's legally possessed, legally carried. Draws his firearm, shoots one of the suspects in the leg, the 14-year-old. The 15-year-old says, hey, dude, I don't want to get shot. So he stays on the scene as well. So they both stay on the scene. Police get there, take them both into custody. 14-year-old survives, just shot in the leg. 15-year-old was never shot. but the firearm that was seized from the 14-year-old or 15-year-old, whichever one had the firearm, turns out to be a BB gun. So Lyft driver wasn't injured, not expected to face any charges or anything like that. However, this is in the article. It doesn't say this, but in the video, attached video in the article, it says that this is the 145th carjacking in Philadelphia this year. That's the first 3 months in a week, right? So that is insane. And I think in that episode, the last DGU episode, or maybe the one before that, I was saying that there were reports that there are more and more carjackings over the past year, and many of them there's a higher percentage of them are being conducted by juveniles. Like, I'm not talking like 16-year-olds. I'm talking like 14, 13, 15-year-olds, like really young kids. And so they're doing grown-up things. So they're going to be held to grown-up standards by, when you start wielding guns and stuff. But yeah, so it's obviously an issue. But luckily this turned out okay. Like I said, I don't know if this guy lost his Lyft job, but as far as I know, Lyft never changed their policy, so we still have a no gun policy.
I'm under the same impression. Lyft and Uber both, prevent the use of or possession of a gun while operating under their services. Is conduct that could cause you to lose access to the app as a driver or as a passenger. Which there are worse things, like being dead. So carjackings are a tough one for me, Matthew, because I guess I'm always trying to hold out hope that if something happens that I don't want to have to use deadly force. Carjackings are hard for me because I think it's very hard. In the moment I have to make the decision, it's going to be very difficult for me to know whether or not this is going to lead to something violent or just property theft. Mm-hmm. Because if I knew, right, if I knew in the moment, like all this person is going to do is take this gun and drive away, that looks like, in fact, I think it's a BB gun, then for sure, like, the car's insured, bro. Like, go to town. But I don't know that. I have no idea. In 2015, and maybe there's been some research done since then. I just happened to do this research in about 2017, and the most recent data I could find was from 2015. In 2015 in America, 115,000 violent crimes, specifically murders or rapes, started out in a car. So the car was where the crime began. Okay, so 115,000 murders and rapes that start out in a crime or start out in a car is a pretty high number. I mean, I'm no mathematician, but 115,000 divided by 365, that's an average of 315 per day in this country. That's not good. So I think, unfortunately, carjacking is one of those things where you just got to be on your game. And because you don't know how it's going to go down, if you have a reasonable threat of death or serious bodily injury, you got to act. Because you don't know what's happening. You don't know what the objective is. You don't know what the criminal's intent is. And I know that about 300 and something people a day either get killed or raped, and that crime starts out in a car, and I don't intend to be on that list. So I don't fault the homeowner. I guess my last thought would just be the gunfights in cars really suck. Very hard to you can't maneuver. You're just stuck in a seat. So you are where you are. You're not going to moving in any situation where you can't move in a gunfight. Pretty crappy situation to be in. You basically have no cover. Visibility is a huge issue because it's really hard to turn and see behind you and to your sides. It takes very little for a glass to effectively spiderweb, and now you're blinded on one side or in front of you or the other side too. So not to mention trajectory changes. If you're trying to shoot through glass, depending on the distance and myriad of other factors, the bullet might not go where you're aiming. Yeah, I do not want to be in a gunfight when I'm sitting in a car. That is not my ideal outcome. So for whatever that's worth, consider that too.
Yeah. And I don't know if I ever shared this on the podcast. I know I wrote an article a long time ago, but I was actually carjacked when I was younger, and I'm not going to get into it now, but you're absolutely right. Like so many crimes begin with inside a vehicle, and so there is a moment where you have to make that decision, and in any use of force, right? Even if it's not a car, but like you're being held up at an ATM or whatnot, where can I comply and get out of this situation? Is there indication that this person just wants property, or is there any indication that this is going to become more violent, or it's not just about the property? It may be partially the property, and they don't want me to be able to identify them. But you have to make that decision, and it's something that you have to have a clarity of mind to be able to do in the midst of a very dangerous and situation. So you're totally right.
Yeah, not bueno.
Nope.
Okay, next we are going to Chicago. There's some suburb mentioned specifically. Beverly. We're going to Beverly, Illinois, which I presume is part of Chicago because this is on the Chicago Tribune. Is it my turn, Matthew? Is it my turn? Okay. So the headline here: Beverly man, 69 years old, with concealed carry license, shoots at 3 would-be robbers, injuring 1. Cops say. I don't know where these journalists come up with this. Okay. Anyway. So here's what roughly is go down. We got 3 teenagers. They're in a stolen vehicle. I think it's a Ford Fusion. Yeah, they're in a gray Ford Fusion, which presumably they stole. It's been reported stolen, and they pull up into this neighborhood in Beverly, and they get out of the car, and they approach a 69-year-old man and quote demanded his belongings. So probably something like, "Hey, give me your wallet and your watch." I don't know. Some people have nice watches, I guess. And the 69-year-old man's like, not today. So he draws his handgun and quote shot toward the group of boys, end quote. This is at 10:35 p.m. So presumably it's a little bit dark outside. Okay. And, I don't know how much visibility he has, but I'm guessing these boys, they see a gun and they start running and he fires toward them. And one of these 3 teenage boy criminal attacker dudes is shot in the knee. They get back to their Ford Fusion, all 3 of them, and they drive off. And apparently the knee shot is hobbles into the Ford as well. Later on, the Ford crashes crashes, and all 3 people quote took off running. I don't know how you do that if you've been shot in the knee, but that's what it says. But soon they were caught by Chicago police officers. 2 of the 3 have been charged. The 3rd one has not. We don't know why. So that's the narrative as I understand it. Matthew, what do we take from this one?
Yeah, not much other than, well, I mean, obviously there's a lot to take, but like I don't have much to add. I'll leave like the heavy hitting stuff to you. But obviously this guy, he's aware enough to be able to respond, right? So he has the gun accessible, right? It's not under the seat in a lockbox or something. It's accessible. Hopefully it's on him, on his person. This is one of those things we recommend, having the gun on you, especially like, if you're in a vehicle and you get into an accident. I see a lot of people using, magnet mounts and things like that. If you get in an accident or anything, even you turn really quickly, and I'm not saying the magnets don't hold it well enough, but it could end up somewhere else in the vehicle or outside the vehicle. You go to pump gas, you get out, the gun's in the car. Anyways, he has the gun on him, which is good, able to respond appropriately. I'm not sure when it says shot around in the direction of the group, if that's just the lingo that the reporter's using, or that's really what he said. Like, hey, I just fired around at some 3 kids or whatever, 3 guys that were robbing me. Either in any event, he ends up hitting one of them in the knee. It doesn't, we have to make our shots count, right? So if let's say this were somebody intending to harm this guy, right, with a firearm, shooting somebody in the knee is probably not going to be effective at stopping this person, right? Obviously, if he's able to run away from the scene of auto crash. He's not injured terribly, right? So if this was, let's say, we use this marksmanship ability in some other instance where the guy has a knife or is actively attacking, then shooting somebody in the knee, or either purposely or not having the ability to shoot center mass or multiple shots to effectively stop that person. This is why we don't really try to shoot people in the extremities or something like that, right? So just one of those things that I pulled out of there. I thought, it's more important that we stop the threat than just shoot rounds towards them. So, and hope that they hit. But
yeah, it's not clear to me. Like, this could be lots of different scenarios. It could be that these kids are like, Mr. Guy, innocent 69-year-old, is taking a walk around the block, getting some exercise in, and these three suspects like get right in his face, like they're really close, like within arm's reach, and they're asking for stuff and saying, give us your stuff. And he draws, and as he's drawing that gun and as it's coming up, these boys are like, oh crap, and they start to run. But he's, as almost as part of his draw strokes, he cracks off a shot, and then he stops himself. It's like, okay, they're gone, they're leaving, I'm good. If that's the case, then it's like, okay, well, your aim may not have been awesome, but all around you probably exercised some good judgment, saying, I don't need to keep shooting, I'm good now, life is good, right? Or it could be something else entirely. It could be that the three suspects are, up in his grill and saying, give us your wallet. And he's like, and he grabs his gun and points at him like, screw you. And they start running. And he's like, yeah, that's what I thought. And then he cracks off a shot at their backs. In which case it's like, that was super not good, right? Like, that's not cool. We talked about that already in today's episode. So like, we're all on the same page. That wouldn't be okay. So anyway, we don't have enough detail to know, like, at what point is a threat made? At what point do the suspects start to run away? At what point is the shot actually fired? And what was he aiming for? Was he, did he just miss? And that's what, or was he aiming for legs because he thought that was the right thing to do? We miss a lot of that information in this case. So I think all your points are super good, Matthew. And I think the other main takeaway from me today, because we have had this happen now in two of the news stories we've looked at, is criminals can't drive. Mm-hmm. Like this one and the Oklahoma one, they both like ran into something and crashed the car. So just, I guess, my 2 cents, if anyone's listening to this, if you're a criminal, like, you need to work on your defensive driving skills, because clearly like a core component of how you get caught is you crash the getaway car. So, get a better driver or learn to drive or something, because this is ridiculous. Like this is embarrassing for the criminal element.
Right.
Stop crashing getaway cars.
And we've covered a lot of stories, DGUs, that start with a vehicle accident, right? Like, I can recall a lot that, police respond to a car crash, and then the guy's getting out stabbing people because or he crashes a car and then carjacks somebody else because that was a stolen car. So this happens quite a bit, where criminals are jumping from car to car or trying to get away or smash something or hide or whatever. So just be aware also, like, if you're responding, you see a car accident and stuff and you want to go help people. I'm not saying don't help, and I'm not saying assume everybody's, some tweaked out dude that just, shot somebody. But I'm just saying, like, keep that in the back of your mind, that this may not be exactly what I think it is initially, so.
Yep. Valid comment. Absolutely. Okay. We're going to California, and this story is on
KIR07.
KIR07. So purportedly this is some local affiliate of, I don't know what station, what network. It doesn't actually say. Like, what crappy branding. KIRO Channel 7. You should let us know if you're an ABC, CBS, NBC, or Fox affiliate. Maybe you're none of the above, and that's why you don't have a logo on your website. All right, so the headline: California resident disarms, shoots, and kills robbery suspect during home invasion, police say. So, Matthew, on the surface, this looks like some John Wick stuff going on. Like, tell us what the crap's happening.
Yeah, so this is an awesome one. This happened in San Diego, California. So in the area of 43rd Street. This is, if you're familiar, this is where the Navy base and naval base is in San Diego. So not a terrible area, but not the greatest, right? It's not the greatest. But anyways, a 62-year-old California resident is returning home. And this is around shortly after 9 p.m. in the evening. He's returning home. He sees two men outside his house, and they confront him outside the home. One holds him at gunpoint and orders him to let them into the home. So all three men go into the home. There's nobody else inside the home. As they're inside the home, one of the suspects going through the home, the guy with the gun still has holding him at gunpoint, the homeowner at gunpoint. At one point, the homeowner, the 62-year-old man, assumes or makes the decision, I'm not going to comply with this anymore. I don't feel comfortable, for whatever reason, he decides compliance isn't going to be my choice. I'm going to try to disarm this guy or get into a physical confrontation with the guy who has the firearm. He does, ends up disarming the guy and shooting him, the guy who was holding him at gunpoint, who was a 39-year-old man, so considerably younger. I don't know the size differences in the health of these guys, but a 62-year-old guy disarms a 39-year-old guy and shoots him. He ultimately dies. The guy, the robber who got shot, ultimately dies. The other suspect is still outstanding, described as an Asian American man, but pretty good story to end with. We saved it to the end because I thought, it was just a really good, I think, explanation or graphic of not giving up, right? Like this guy, for whatever reason, he decided, I'm not going to comply, and decides, I'm going to do this. And he overcomes, a much younger person, presumably, maybe more fit or stronger or whatever. But this is an awesome story to end with. We've had some, kind of downers, but I think this is a good story to end with. I'm sure you have a lot to add, Jacob.
Yeah, no, I think all those comments are super good. I don't know if John Cree is the genesis of this phrase, but he'll often say that you have to wait your turn. And at least I learned that phrase from him. And I think oftentimes in a confrontation, in a fight, you do have to wait your turn. So in this case, the homeowner, however old he was, 62 or whatever, he waited his turn. So either initially he just didn't see an opening and he's like, yeah, it's not my turn yet. I got to wait until the opportunity is right. Or perhaps something changed. It went from him thinking, yeah, not a big deal. These guys are going to take my laptop, to somehow something happens. He observes, thinks, remembers, sees something that makes him think, you know what, this could go sour. I think I need to take action. So I don't know if something changed or if he just was waiting the whole time for his turn. And when John Correa says, you got to wait your turn, what he's meaning is you have to wait for your opening. When someone's looking right at you, pointing a gun at your face, it's a really bad time for you to make a move. So sometimes your turn is when someone turns away, when they're distracted, when the gun moves, any number of things that could happen that create the opening you need. One of the challenges, I think, in this case is, presumably the 30-something-year-old dude probably has a physical advantage over the 62-year-old something dude. We don't know. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe 62-year-old dude's a former Navy SEAL. He lives in the right place in California. That could be the case. But maybe your turn in that case has to be a different thing. You have to be looking for something more significant for you to act. I think about this a lot when it comes to like draw speed, right? I know my draw speed roughly in a defensive encounter is probably going to be between 1 and 1.5 seconds, right? Because on my best day, if I'm warmed up, I can get right around 0.9, 0.95. So in a defensive encounter, I always just presume I'm probably 1 to 1.5 seconds. So I know that if I have to wait my turn to draw a gun, I need an opening that gives me at least 1.5 seconds, preferably 2 seconds, because even if I shoot someone, they still have a certain amount of time to continue to react. So you got to figure out, like, when you're looking for your opening, like what kind of an opening do you need? And that's obviously going to vary by circumstance. And in this case, it's not about how quick this guy could draw. It was about him having to wrestle a gun away from somebody. I kind of presumed that the second home intruder was not armed, because that would be a really tough decision. If it's like, I'm going to go wrestle a gun away from this dude, but his buddy's armed. I don't think I'd want to be that. I don't think I'd want to be in that situation. So I kind of in my head just kind of assumed that maybe only one dude was armed. So if I can wrestle that dude and get the gun away from him, then I'm going to be in a good place. I put myself in the advantage. There's a comment here from one of our live viewers, Jared. He says, determination and violence of action can often tip the scales in your balance. So I really like that, because it's also an issue of like, well, these home intruders, how committed are they? Because if I'm more determined than they are, like if I'm ready to flip a switch and go completely ape bat crazy on you right now, and die trying, that's going to give me an advantage over you, even if maybe you're stronger, younger, bigger, or whatever. So I think that wait your turn, know what that means for you, how big of an opportunity you need in order to respond. And when you flip that switch, you got to be determined. You've got to be ready to do whatever is necessary to win. Absolutely.
Yeah, it is a thing. Like I kind of mentioned earlier about flipping the switch, and you came full circle again. It's that ability to say, like, when it's time, you have to have a determination and a focus of survival, right? And so, but we can't have that run through all the time, because number one, it's terribly difficult psychologically to be turned on like that all the time, right? And secondly, it causes us to maybe prematurely act when it's not our turn, or it's not our opening, or it's not tactically advantageous for us to do it. And so that's why, you have to have that kind of, and everybody's different, right? Like not some people are going to be in a wheelchair. Some people are walking with a walker. Some people, maybe, I don't drink alcohol, but maybe some people drink alcohol. And you have to understand that if you're drinking alcohol, you may not be as aware and able to think on your feet as quickly and formulate a plan so quickly and pick up these things. And so these are all things that you factor into your everyday life of how am I going to be able to best survive, and what do I have to do? And I think a lot of it starts with that mental training, because we're not all as strong as each other. I'm not as strong as a lot of people, but I do know that my brain is always going to be able to switch on very quickly and start formulating a plan, and I'm going to do the best I can to survive. And that's going to be, my best attribute, because I can't always physically overpower somebody. So.
Yep. All super valid. And you're cutting yourself short though. Literally, Matthew's not the tallest guy I know, but I would not want to grapple with you, my friend. So, gentlemen and ladies out there, thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We do need to announce our weekly winner. A reminder that you can sign up for a weekly giveaway every week by going to concealedcarry.com/podcast prize, or you can go to podcasts.concealedcarry.com and click on giveaway. And we're really excited about these giveaways. We're kind of putting some renewed emphasis on those and adding some cooler prizes to that rotation. So make sure you always enter to win there. So Matthew, what's this week's giveaway and who won?
So this week we're giving away a DVD, Top 10 Things You Probably Don't Know About Self-Defense Law from Andrew Branca. Very cool prize.
Yeah. It's like a $20 DVD or something. And I learned something when I watched it. So Matthew, who wins?
The winner is Ken. Ken, you're going to receive an email. Just make sure you check your junk mail. His last name starts with an S. So if you're Ken S., check your junk mail if you haven't gotten one and you entered into this week's giveaway.
There's probably like 1 billion Ken S's on,
right.
on Earth, but only so many that could possibly have entered our giveaway. So, all right, Ken, thank you and congratulations. And next week, what are we giving away, Matthew?
The giveaway that's going on now that you should enter, we're giving away a Ready Up Gear ear clip for electronic hearing protection or ear muff type hearing protection that allows you to clip that onto your belt rather than put it around your head or around your thigh or something, or lose it on the bench somewhere like I always do. It's awesome.
The ear clip is a simple but fantastic product.
Yes.
We We've been very surprised how quickly they've sold. So we set one aside and dedicated it for the giveaway. So check it out, concealedcarry.com/podcast prize, or just go to podcasts.concealedcarry.com and click on weekly giveaway. All right, folks, there you have it from us. Like always, we encourage you to subscribe to the podcast on your mobile or listening device. Find a podcast app. Maybe one came on your phone, or you can download one and make sure you're subscribed. That way you'll get notified every time a new episode gets published. And you can listen to that on your commute, or when you're cleaning the house, or out exercising or working out, or whatever it might be. And we hope that you'll take advantage of this content we put out there. We're coming up on episode 500, and I'll just tease and tell you something special is coming with episode 500. Not only just with that episode, but also some changes to the podcast that we think are going to be very, very positive, and we're really excited about what's coming. So make sure you subscribe, and you can also remember you can always leave us a review on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. Thank you, everyone. We appreciate you being with us today. Any salutations, Matthew?
Stay safe, guys.
Stay safe. So remember to train right, train often, train safe, so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.